Hey folks, Scott Fischer here, and welcome to my latest video on painting. And today we're going to talk about these weird little skulls that I'm doing for a new series, just to experiment and see how far I can push the form and how well I can use acrylic ink. We call them strange skulls. Let's get into it. So I took a little bit of acrylic ink and I put it in a plastic cup, and I mean, it's almost the viscosity of like dirty paint water, right? And I'm doing these abstract forms on pre-primed Gessoboard. These are made by Ampersand and they come pre-toned like this. I'm using a fat Simmons white sable brush there, and I'm just digging in. I'm trying to like figure out where the skin of the holes for the eyes are going to be, all that stuff. After I get some basic forms, I switch to a smaller brush, which is still a Simmons, but it's like a number 6 liner brush, and I start drawing details directly with paint. I have no idea what these are going to look like. I've got a bunch of skull stuff around the studio, so I know what skulls look like, but I don't know what these are going to look like. I want to see if I could really push the form around. I thought I was going to work all three of them at first, like all the way through, but I thought, no way, man, you need to finish one. So we jumped to the top one. Mixing up some more acrylic ink, I actually just went ahead and dove into the sockets of the skull and used like a dirty purple and just pushing those forms around and making the drawing a little bit darker, but not going to black yet. With that long liner brush, I can actually drop in these huge washes of color, and if you lay the brush on its side, it's kind of neat. You can actually pull like these big gradients with it. So that was pretty cool, but the idea is just to make it so that the skull is actually getting darker as you go to the outer edges of it. I switched to a different paint than I normally use this time, which was like a blue airbrush paint by Badger. I put clear water through the center, which you saw me do in the beginning, and now I'm working that blue into the water, and when it hits the clear water, it does a blend. It like does this cool gradient, so we can keep moving with it. I'm trying to push the form a little bit more with this stuff, but all of this is really to set up my middle values. So after I get it to this far, I go ahead and take black FW acrylic ink, and I'm going to cut out the silhouette of the skull. It looks pretty cool as a blue to begin with, but I want these to feel like they're skulls inside a box, and cutting them out with black is the fastest way to get it. But this black dries light in value. It goes up a few values lighter than it normally is. So I use a glazing medium, which you're going to see in a second. This is a golden gloss glazing medium. I put it over the whole thing. That's not to seal it, it's just to make the black black again. You can still see the streaks of the glazing medium actually. Now I'm jumping in with my dip pins. I tend to use the Nikko, Nikko G nib, like the letter G is in Gary. I do most of the work with it, and I'm using pretty much 2 highlight colors. I've got a warm color, which is like a buff titanium golden fluid acrylic, and I mixed up a light blue to do a secondary highlight, and then I've got the black to push the darks to the darkest. And there you go. So that's the first one. And with this as a successful experiment, I decided to do another one. So that went quick. Let's do it again. I wiped out the original star drawing. I didn't like it. Let's do it all over again. I wanted the whole skull to kind of do a star theme, almost like a starfish at the top where it wraps back in space. We're using that same dirty water. Now, in my hand, I have one of those Arm & Hammer erasing sponges that you use in the kitchen. And that's a great way to get paint off a surface. And that's how I cleaned it before I got into this. I got that same purple I used before on the last one, and we're digging right in, doing these details. I'll use it for some gradients. I'm looking at my contours. Now I'm shading one half of the face with that dirty water, and I begin glazing red over it. Now my go-to glaze is actually the alizarin crimson golden. FW doesn't have one that quite does that for me, so just like the blue, I glazed it and it got darker towards the corners. I surround it with black. I'm going to seal it again with that varnish to push it to black again. You can see it just got darker. And now I'm going to go in with straight black and push my darkest darks. And then I go back to that more of a dirty red color. I'm always mixing these things. It's all custom made in these little stupid, like, tins that I have around, or plastic tubs. I used warm and cool for this one. This was going to be the red skull. Again, using that ivory warm white to pull the core highlights, and then you're going to see me switch to a blue highlight to do kind of highlighting around the outer edges. And when you do warm and cool highlights together, it can really pull some interesting forms and push things back and forth. So that's the second one. So now I was digging it, so we go ahead and we put some Roman numerals on there. And I'm fired up, but I think I do really need one more. I'm about to go to a convention, and 3 is a series. 2, you're just kind of experimenting. Let's get to 3. And at this point, I want to do 200 of these, so I better learn my Roman numerals pretty well. This is a rather long video of me writing numbers, but you get the idea. I drew it with a watercolor pencil first because I needed to get the numbers right, and then I used the highlighting colors to draw the rest of it. I wiped out what I had before and started over again because I'm really liking this frontal view. I like the symmetry. And my idea behind the third skull was to see if I could make a pretty skull, an Art Nouveau skull, I guess. You know, Cameo jewelry has like faces in it and stuff. I thought, could I just make a skull like that? So starting with that same dirty water you can see, and actually I had 3 versions of that dirty water that got progressively darker that I could dip into. I'm using that same dirty purple, and I'm going to knock in the eye sockets and the darkest parts of it at this stage and draw my lines, working on my symmetry, leaving a lot open at the top. And this was going to be the green skull, and I know that going into it, and I have an idea of how I might do it. But you see, I just shaded one side of it with a fat Robert Simmons white sable and more of that dirty paint water. I'm letting the brush split and letting those hairs make drag marks, which is actually already pulling form before I even start my final render. Jumping in with green, this is FW ink. It's a combination of their olive and their sap green and even like a fluorescent green that they have. And I'm knocking in my forms. I'm always trying to decide like how much detail do I do, and then where can I let the detail fade out a little bit. I got there pretty fast with this. I've done it 3 times now, so we go ahead and we cut out the silhouette once again with the black ink. And it's going down once again lighter, so I'm going to have to use this, here it is, the Golden Artist Gloss Acrylic Glazing Medium, I think it's called. Once that's on there, I can start working in my blacks everywhere. See how it dries so light? There it is in the middle value state. Now, I'm going in, once again, with my light, my warm color, my warm highlight, and it's pretty much all this, guys. That's the crazy thing. If your middle values are right, you can pretty much render up your highlights with 2 colors. Because what's happening is, the warm white is reacting to what's underneath it. The cool white is also reacting to what's underneath it. So if you put it on something light, it's not going to make a huge change. If you put it on something dark, there's going to have more contrast. And there it is, the final version. Skull number 3. And this seemed rather timely for Halloween, so I thought it'd be a good video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. This is the tour we saw at the beginning, and using those warm and cools. Working out of my imagination as much as possible. A real study in like letting it build from abstracts, because normally I have a tight drawing before I start a piece, and this was just like, let's find the form. And I thank you very much for sticking with me on this, guys. Some tight detail for you, with that warm and that cool. That cool around the eyeballs, the stars there. I thought that was kind of a neat move. But look how there wasn't a whole lot on the top of the forehead. Most of that crunchy detail is like a gradient of detail that disperses as you get around from the core of the piece. And that's it, guys. Thank you for sticking with me on this. I hope you dug them, and follow me on Instagram if you want to see more of this kind of stuff, because I share it all the time. Okay?